By way of background, for tonight's reflection on our sermon texts, I need to tell you a little bit about my own story. I don't do that to call attention to myself, but actually to invite you to do the same thing, reflect on your story in light of the scriptures. I'm a cradle Episcopalian, that rare thing. Most of us in the Episcopal Church have joined the church at some point during their lifetime. I have been an Episcopalian since my birth. Or maybe I should say, since my baptism. I was raised on the 1928 prayer book, and I still hear those rhythmic cadences in my head from time to time, although I will say I'm a very happy right-to person, but somehow my nerve endings were first stimulated in church by the language of the 1928 book. Some of you may remember from 1928 that there was a custom when celebrating the Eucharist for the priest to stand at the back at the end of the liturgy and read the last gospel, which was its own translation of the text from the Gospel of John, the great and majestic Johannine prelude. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, all during my growing up years, during my most formative spiritual experiences in church, the priest who read that last gospel had a very emphatic, stentorian tone. You paid attention. And I still can hear that voice and those cadences from that last gospel. It's kind of an earworm sometimes. Hey, better than an advertising jingle, don't you think? And so that's been a part of my consciousness for as long as I can remember. Now, I want to say that I was a biology professor in a small private college before I went to seminary. One of the things that I had to do was to prep labs, because when you did biolabs, if the labs didn't work, they fell flat, their teaching value was gone. Students, the undergrads taking the labs, rolled their eyes, used words like, well, that was a flop, that was a lame lab. Some of them even wrote angry letters to the campus newspaper. So you learned to try out and prep your labs. One of my favorite labs was the lab involving cell division, which involved sea urchins. Stay with me here. Sea urchins. There are boy and girl sea urchins, and when you properly stimulate them, I will spare you the details, but when you give them a tiny electric shock, they will release into the seawater around them the cells that will form a new sea urchin. I practiced that lab one night when I was by myself in the science building, just to make sure that everything was going to work the next day. So, under the microscope, in a lovely little thin layer of seawater, I could see cell division take place. The egg of a sea urchin is that large. You could see the chromosomes line up on the midline, and then you could see that one cell become two cells, and two cells become four cells, and four cells, etc. Remember, this is how all of us got started. And so I was, as always, enraptured by the sight of that cell division happening right under my microscope. And this particular night, I was feeling reflective, and I asked myself, how does that cell division happen? What's going on there? And I thought and thought, and I realized that actually all biology is ultimately chemistry. The contractile proteins, the filaments, the DNA replication. Trust me, science class will be over very soon, so hang in. And all of that is really about chemistry of compounds interacting with the chemistry of which our bodies are made. And so I got thinking that was really quite a profound line of thought. And I wondered, what is it that's under chemistry? What is it that makes chemistry go? And I realized it's physics, right? Transformations of energy from chemical energy to kinetic energy, etc. And I began thinking that I was really quite a profound individual to be asking these kinds of questions. And then I said to myself, what is it that's under physics? And friends, here is where you run into a brick wall. You could say mathematics, but that's not true. Mathematics is just a language. It has no content of its own. And so I sat there feeling quite drawn into this question. And I was sure there must be some kind of an answer. And all of a sudden, the words of the last gospel came into my mind. Unbidden, complete surprise, the words were, all that is alive with his life, and that life was the light of men. All that is alive with his life. And at that moment, the last gospel playing in my head taught me that this nativity story is one way of talking about the coming of Jesus. The text we heard from the Gospel of John is another way of talking about the coming of Jesus. This infant Jesus, born of a virgin mother, born as a human being, is God become flesh, taking on our flesh, because God so wanted to become one with us. But this story is of a larger story, and that is the story of the cosmic Christ, the one who is the second person of the Trinity, who the Greeks called the Logos, the Word. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, if you look inside your service bulletin, quite near the front, you will find a present from me. It's a poem. Please look at it now, if you would. I invite you to follow along. Written by the Welsh poet R.S. Thomas, an Anglican clergyman, who spoke all sorts of brusque truth about the world around him. He was not one to fancy it up. He was rather stark. But if you look at that poem, you'll see at the very beginning, it posits a conversation between God, the Creator, and God in the incarnate Word. The first and second persons of the Trinity are talking. There's a little globe, and the Son, the second person of the Trinity, looks at the earth, looks at all of its struggle, the harshness of it, looking down upon all of it. The Son sees, the poem tells us, people raising their arms to a tree, desperate. And as the second person of the Trinity sees that human desperation, he says, "Let me go there." To God, let me go there. For me, this is one of the most profound ways of talking about the instinct, the divine desire to come and be with us. The desire that Jesus, in fact, enacts in his life. Let me go there. Let me go there and make myself one with this created order. Let me go there and make myself one with this humanity that agonizes, suffers, and yearns with outstretched arms. Let me go there. Let me go there for healing, for teaching, to build justice, to bring ever more closely that which God purposes for the human community in terms of mercy, compassion, and how we treat one another and how we treat the creation itself. So there is the cosmic Christ in this poem, in dialogue with the Creator, looking down at the human condition, moved with compassion beyond any language you and I could find to describe that compassion, that instinct, that drive that is part of the identity of God to be with us. To be with us. To live life suffering as we do, laughing as we do, fearful as we are, tired as we are, choosing in the incarnate Word, the Word made flesh, choosing as God to enter every aspect of the human experience, just like you and me, just like us. Now, it is said that Leo Tolstoy, great Russian author, developed the concept that inside every human heart is a hole that is God-shaped, because we're built that way. We were built to yearn for God. We were built with this empty place inside us. And many of us spend many years filling that empty space up with anything handy. But it is a mercy, my dear friends, that whatever we put in that hole to try and dull aching is going to fail us eventually, until we keep groping, hoping, yearning for a bit of God to fill that hole. And as the years go upon years, that ever more of God fills that hole. This is the thing that Howard Thurman, great American theologian of the last century, called deep hunger. This deep hunger that we have for the bliss, the love, the compassion, the presence of God, the Word made flesh. So this is why we're here tonight, to celebrate the birth of a human infant who is fully God, but also to celebrate the forthcomingness, the coming to us of God as the cosmic Christ, the one who was from before time, the one who was in the beginning with God, the one who became flesh as the cosmic Christ became the incarnate Son of God. And so, dear friends, may this Christmas find you filling up your God-shaped hole with song and prayer and scripture and service, wherever you are, however you are here with us digitally or physically. May there be for you a bit of a filling as the Word made flesh, the forthcomingness of God to us fills you just a bit. May it be so.